And we must look at the greater strategic picture, not only at the graphics and the horrible, gruesome violence that we see on the streets, but we must ask ourselves, who is benefiting from this and who is orchestrating? If it becomes clear that these are Iranian actions, then I think that the response shouldn't be confined to Gaza and Gazan hands, but it should also go to those that have sent these murderers into Israeli streets.
All right, Jonathan, I'm going to thank you for joining us and for sharing your views with us on what really is a very disturbing story from Israel. We hope that you, your friends, your family are safe. This comes at a time when attacks are taking place, remember, in residential areas, even in Tel Aviv. And there are very sketchy details as of now. We'll, of course, continue to keep a very close eye on those developments. For the moment, I'm also going to bring in my colleague, our managing editor, Gaurav Sawant, into this conversation. Gaurav, first of all, the army, did they not see this coming? Secondly, what has led to this sudden escalation?
So the army, of course, was caught off guard. There's another reason for it. There have been a series of protests that are taking place in Israel. Several reservists had said they will not rejoin service, and protests were happening. So, Israel was going through quite a situation. But this was unprecedented. An attack of this scale by terrorists has never happened in the history of Israel. The manner in which 5,000 rockets were fired, the manner in which multiple, we've had one 2611. This would be equivalent to multiple 2611s happening simultaneously in Israel. Some of the images that we've seen are actually horrifying, too horrifying to be put on air. The manner in which Israeli civilians are being targeted by terrorists, the way they infiltrated. You know what defies logic? I've reported from on ground in Israel, and they have not only amongst the best intelligence systems, they also have eyes across the fence. And they were caught napping. They were caught napping completely. The manner in which vehicles have come in, banging through the security gates, breaking through the security gates, firing indiscriminately in the streets, started from the south, now moving towards Tel Aviv, also targeting Jerusalem. This is extremely alarming, the situation on ground, and sincerely hope it's brought under control as quickly as possible. The retribution that, both our guests were talking about, that indeed would be swift, but, it may just lead to another spiral of violence. But as our guests were pointing out, whoever has been involved in the planning of this massive multi-pronged offensive on Israel, there would have to be consequences, and the apprehension is it would lead to major escalation in the days and weeks ahead.
Undoubtedly. Gaurav, for the moment, I'm going to thank you, but we'll keep coming, in fact, back to you for more details on that story as far as this latest escalation in Israel is concerned. Let's, in fact, get our viewers the very latest pictures as far as the Israel-Palestine conflict escalates. Tension simmers at the Gaza Strip. These pictures of the Palestinian terrorists in the Gaza Strip carried out an unprecedented infiltration into southern Israel, firing thousands of rockets into the country. Terror group Hamas has announced the beginning of a new operation against Israel. Palestinian terrorist groups Hamas has released more images of their terrorists infiltrating Israeli territory. Fighter tanks were seen on standby in the conflict zone. Following a state of war declared in Israel, a clip showed police in southern Israel engaging with Palestinian terrorists. It surfaced on social media after reports said 5,000 rockets were launched into Israel from the Gaza Strip today morning. Palestinian civilians were seen celebrating following the invasion of southern Israel by Hamas-led armed groups. Remember, at least 5 have been killed, more than 100 have been injured due to multiple rocket attacks by Hamas terror group. Worrying situation in Israel. We'll continue to keep a very close eye on all those developments. For the moment, these are pictures and videos that have in fact flooded social media platforms, and they speak volumes of the current crisis there in Israel. That brings us to the end of this edition. Thank you for watching. And we have some news just coming in, and this is from Israel. Gaza has launched an all-out attack on Israel. 5,000 rockets have been fired. Israel vows to fight back. The defense minister has said, we will win this war.
חמאס עשה טעות חמורה הבוקר, הוא פתח במלחמה כנגד מדינת ישראל. חיילי צה"ל נלחמים בכל נקודות החדירה כנגד האויב. אני קורא לאזרחים להישמע להוראות פיקוד העורף ולבצע אותם כלשונן. מדינת ישראל תנצח במלחמה הזאת.
That's the message from the Israeli government there, the defense minister saying, we will win this war. This comes at a time when Israel is under attack from Gaza, essentially. Hanania Naftali is joining us live from Tel Aviv, and Jonathan Conricus, the former IDF spokesperson, is also now joining us live. Thank you both for your time. A very worrying situation in Israel right now. These are very disturbing pictures. First to you, Hanania, I want to ask you, if you could, give us an idea about the current situation there and what does it look like? We believe the attacks started at 6:30 a.m. this morning.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I have to say that this is a radical Islamist war against Israel right now that caught all of us Israelis by surprise. I can say for myself and my family that we woke up from rocket sirens and not the phone alarm, and we had to run to the bomb shelter to save our lives. So I think that now, in terms of numbers, it is still not clear. The Hamas terror organization, they report that they have kidnapped dozens of Israeli civilians and soldiers, as well as over 5,000 rockets that they launched into Israel. I understand that right now the situation in southern Israel, from friends I'm speaking with, is very fragile, and also that they...
Don't scroll away. It's Senator Warnock. Listen, in 2022, over
unprecedented level of Israeli settlers attacks on Palestinians, unprecedented level of Israeli attacks on the Aqsa Mosque, and unprecedented level of killing Palestinians. Since the beginning of this year, 248 Palestinians were killed by Israeli troops.
Hamas has called on all Palestinians to join them, and some have celebrated the attack. These pictures taken in the Jenin refugee camp on the West Bank. However, the Israeli Prime Minister says the enemy will pay a terrible price. Days of conflict and bloodshed await. John Sparks, Sky News.
OK, time now for a look at today's newspapers with Neil Patterson.
Welcome to the press preview, our first look at the front pages as they arrive. Over the next half an hour or so, we will be taking a look at what's making the headlines with the Sunday Mirror's assistant editor, Laura Armstrong, and the executive director of the Youth Endowment Fund, John Yates. With you guys in just a second, but let's run you through the front pages, and we begin with The Observer. The attack by Hamas militants on Israel and the retaliation against Gaza is, of course, their lead story. The headline, hundreds die and hostages held as Hamas assault shocks Israel. And that shock is reflected in The Telegraph. It calls the situation Israel's 9/11 moment. As you might imagine, the taking of civilian hostages by Hamas, of course against international law, is described in the Sunday Express with this rather stark headline, Human Shield Horror. The Sunday Times has detail of how those hostages were physically dragged from their homes by men with Kalashnikovs in scenes they say were ripped from a nightmare. The Mail, powerful story this. It concentrates on a picture of one terrified Israeli woman being seized by Hamas gunmen. Their headline, Don't Kill Me. The People report on what they say is a £1.5 billion plan by Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer to rescue the NHS from crisis, if that is, Labour wins the next general election. After news of an alleged plot to kidnap and murder TV presenter Holly Willoughby, the Sunday Mirror says that she and her former This Morning co-host Philip Schofield have resolved their personal differences. And The Sun, well, it's seen a High Court papers in which the former Britain's Got Talent judge, David Walliams, well, he's been claiming that being sacked from the show made him feel suicidal. And The Star on Sunday tells us that a house in Los Angeles bought by Star Trek actor Sir Patrick Stewart is supposedly haunted. Just a reminder, by scanning that QR code you can see on screen at various points during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers whilst watching us. Multimedia. Tonight we are joined by the Sunday Mirror's assistant editor Laura Armstrong and the executive director of the Youth Endowment Fund, John Yates. Guys, good to have you back on again. And let's start with obviously the main story for almost all of the newspapers. And we'll begin with the Observer's front page. Hundreds die, hostages held as the Hamas assault shocks Israel. It is a horrific situation, and it is only one that is going to get worse, Laura.
It is, absolutely. I think that, obviously, today there's been a huge focus on the casualties. There have already been around 200 on each side, thousands injured. But the next question is where it does go next. And I think one question that's certainly being asked a lot is, will they be joined, Hamas, by other forces? Will Hezbollah get involved from Lebanon? Will that involve further Hezbollah forces coming from Syria? It's, you know, Hezbollah, I believe, have spoken about this and said it sends a strong message, sort of an implicit support there, but whether or not they actually get involved is another question, and they obviously have even more weapons, even more military strength. So this has the capacity to absolutely explode.
I mean, I suppose the part of the question, John, is, I mean, just how unified Palestinians are in all of this. You've got the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, talking to Palestine, but, of course, not talking to Hamas, a proscribed terrorist organisation in America's view, instead talking to the Palestinian Authority. But what power does the Palestinian Authority hold these days?
And the answer is very little. I mean, I think the word that leads on that headline that stands out is shock. I think this is a shocking story. We're used to there being violence in the Middle East. We're used to there being conflict between Israel and Palestinians. But the level of brutality, the level of violence in this, as people woke up this morning to hear rockets come firing in, to see the wall being knocked down, to see tanks coming in, to see tanks being overtaken, as you can see in the picture there. I mean, this is pretty shocking personal stuff, seeing people being kidnapped and taken out of Israel. But it's also going to send shockwaves through the Middle East. I mean, there's going to be a shockwave sent through Israel as to who is responsible for not preventing this. You know, Israel's security has been based on knowing that an attack is coming and preventing it. Somebody is going to be at fault for this not being prevented, but the shock is going to be much wider than that as to how other countries in the area start to respond.
Well, let's take a look at the front of the Sunday Express. I mean, their headline there, Human Shield Horror, and I suppose this goes to the failures of intelligence, Laura, that there is a reason that Hamas have been able to take young people, old people, civilians, non-combatants hostage, and it was because of that intelligence failure. And if you suppose that there was an intelligence failure on the part of the Israelis, I mean, the White House have already had to deny that they had any specific knowledge, but, you know, surely the United States should probably have seen this coming as well.
Well, I think that there's an argument that everybody should have seen this coming, particularly with the tensions that have been building over the West Bank for so long. And I think as well, if you look at the timing of this, 50 years plus 1 day since the Yom Kippur War in 1973, that isn't a coincidence, is it? Let's face it.
No.
And I think that you can, much as people are asking questions now of what happened with the Israeli intelligence, you have to be aware of the human sense of it. You had people wandering around the streets, being shocked by these air raid sirens, not knowing what to do next, having Hamas militiants walking through their streets and literally not knowing what to do. And the horror of that must have been extreme.
And I suppose if we take a look at the Sunday Telegraph headline, you know, Hamas terrorists butcher civilians as a stunned Israel suffers a 9/11 moment. I mean, I've often heard people talking in other circumstances about 9/11 moments, but this may well actually be, that might be the first time I've seen it used properly, frankly.
Yeah, and I think that 9/11 comparison is really a powerful one, not just because Israel didn't see this coming, not just because it's a horrible terrorist attack, but also because 9/11 was a moment that shook up the world and questioned, actually, what is happening between different countries, who is at peace with who, where's the conflict going to go. We're in a moment in time when actually things were looking slightly brighter in the Middle East. We were quite close to a remarkable breakthrough with Saudi Arabia signing a normalisation, effectively a peace agreement with Israel.
Well, isn't that partly why Hamas have done this?
I think that's got to be the obvious question, and this completely disrupts that deal. And I'll tell you, what is the one country in the world who would be delighted to see a deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia not happening? That's Iran. And it is striking that Iran is the country that has come out to commend what Hamas has been done here. And I think we've got to hope that over the next 2 or 3 weeks, there are some cool, calm minds looking for the way to renormalise things. But it's not going to be easy.
It's hard to imagine that when you're looking at the factions involved here. And as you were saying, you know, the fact that this deal was being brought through just adds to the shock.
And what makes it harder is how incredibly vulnerable the Israeli government is at the moment. We're not looking at a steady... You know, those who have followed this will know the Prime Minister is presently in the middle of a massive argument with his country and with his coalition about some huge reforms to effectively the basic laws of Israel, which changes the way the Supreme Court... It's huge. They've had thousands of people out on the street. And in the middle of that uncertainty that Netanyahu's got, he's suddenly got this to deal with. Yeah. And that should make us more worried about how this is going to play out.
The front of the Mail on Sunday, War on Israel, Don't Kill Me Again, another of the newspapers choosing to go with the hostages that have been taken. And look, you can decry all of the tactics that Hamas have used, particularly the taking of non-combatants, of taking civilians. But, you know, we heard from Benjamin Netanyahu earlier warning civilians living in Gaza to get out. And we all know that is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, for many of them. The simple fact of the matter is, isn't it, Laura, that we are going to see innocents on both sides losing their lives in numbers, and greater numbers than that which we have seen today, the bloodiest day that I've known in the Middle East for a while.
Well, this is it. You know, you're looking at these figures, it's 12 hours, and it's just gone, the death toll has risen and risen and risen and risen. And I think that for these people, because they have been blindsided by this in such a way, we can sit here in a studio and sort of talk about what people should do. It's chaos out there, I think. You know, if you look at some of the footage, people don't know where to go, what to do. There was a long period this morning where people didn't really have any idea what was going on at all because the Prime Minister hadn't addressed the people other than in a short clip on Twitter. They had no idea what was going on. So amidst all that chaos, it's very hard to sort of... It's not a case where people can calmly and coolly take themselves to the exit.
And we're going to have to try and find a way over the next 2 weeks to both remember that terrorist violence has no defence and recognise that there are civilians here on both sides who are victims and who will suffer. And we need to feel equal sympathy, I think, for innocent civilians who are Israeli and innocent civilians who are Palestinian, without for a moment defending or justifying the indefensible.
In the front of the Sunday Times, sorry, I'm with you in just a second, Laura, because I just want to bring in, because again, another striking picture, mother, child, you know, with the IDF kind of officers on standby. I believe that's what that photo is showing. Yeah, indeed, in Ashkelon. Look, it is incredibly difficult to talk about issues in this particular part of the world sometimes because of frankly, the way in which both sides will respond. But surely it is undeniable that as of this moment, the idea that there will be peace in this part of the world is for the birds. It's gone for the time being, surely.
I think it's certainly very hard to see. There have been many commentators today saying that it's impossible to see how this will be resolved without a ground invasion into Gaza. And there is no question that is going to end with a huge amount of bloodshed on both sides. And I think, you know, to touch on what John was saying earlier, this is going to have a massive impact. We already have right now in London extra Met officers being put out to deal with people reacting to this. There are many people outside celebrating this and others protesting against it. So it is clearly going to have a big impact by many people with very strong feelings about what's happened here.
But I think there is a cause amidst this horror for some small amount of hope, that the path to peace for the last few decades has been trying to resolve the Palestinian challenge. What's happened over the last decade has been a move towards peace while not trying to resolve the Palestinian problem. Now, we all would like resolution, but we are seeing peace agreements being signed between Israel and Arab nations without this incredibly difficult problem being solved. I'm not convinced that that has completely gone, because it's massively in the interest of Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Israel, a lot of these Arab countries, to find a way to work more peacefully together. But we're going to have to somehow get through the next few weeks, and it's going to require some very, very clever involvement from the Americans to make sure that people are keeping their eye on the advantage for everyone if there can be some peace agreements.
And the very latest that I'm seeing on wires from an Israeli army spokesman, of course, the Israeli army, according to Benjamin Netanyahu, able to use their full force at their disposal to deal with what is going on. A suggestion that there is still fighting in southern Israel, that there are still Hamas terrorists on the ground in the country as well. The situation not fully under control. Well, I think I could probably guess that myself. Laura, John, let's pause there just for a second. After the break, we will have much more of tomorrow's front pages, including this story from the Sunday Telegraph. Rishi Sunak to end sick note culture. We'll explain why after this.
Look, it is the story of Australian nurses and British women, Dutch nuns, throw in the odd Kiwi, and other nationalities, and incredible American women, who were kept prisoner by the Japanese in the jungles of Sumatra for 3 years and 7 months. Yeah, look, I had to write it as fiction because when I write stories, I like to write them using dialogue and being able to imagine the settings that you can't get described. But can I tell you, though, every single storyline, every vignette in this book happened. It may not, and this is the thing that I'm a bit sad about, it may not have happened to the person I've given it to, because there were 500 women there. I couldn't write about all 500. But fiction, yes, those storylines you'll read about, they happened, every single one of them. The fact that they were in the jungle, that nobody knew they existed for all that time. There were Japanese prisoner of war camps in Singapore. Changi's the most famous one known. And so the people in Australia and in Britain knew that there were men and women being held in prisoner of war camps. They did not know about this one. Look, her name is Nora Chambers, and oh my gosh, everybody here in the UK needs to know this woman's name and who she was. She had trained at the Royal Academy of Music here in London, so a very, very gifted, talented musician. After a while, the women started performing plays and having concerts, and so singing was part of the camp life anyway. Just on those Saturday night concerts, they put on to entertain themselves. But Nora took it one step further. She said, we need the classics. Well, how can you represent Schubert, Mozart, Tchaikovsky, Ravel when you don't have any instruments? So she trained.
Before, and under our leadership, the forgotten man and woman will be forgotten no longer. With your help, your love, and your vote, we will put America first, and we will quickly and strongly make America great again. Thank you. Thank you, Iowa. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you. What a nice crowd. A lot of people outside, too, trying to get in. I want to thank you very much. This has been a great place for me and for you and for all of us together. We came here together. Cedar Rapids, thank you very much. It's great to be back here and great to be back in Iowa. Great. You are just 100 days away from the most important vote of your lives. I used to say that about 2016. I said this is going to be the most important vote, and it was at that time. And then we went to 2020. We did much better in 2020 than we did in 2016. Got millions and millions of more votes, so we're not going to let that happen again with what they did. With your support on Monday, January 15th, we're going to win the Iowa caucuses in an epic landslide. And we're going to crush crooked Joe Biden next November, and we're going to make America great again, greater than ever before. Very important. We have some incredible friends with us today. State Representatives Brad Sherman. Where's Brad? Brad. Thank you, Brad. Good. Nice to see you. Mark Cisneros. Mark. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. And Cindy Golding. Cindy, thank you very much. Thank you very much. State Senators Charlie.
Minute